I'm thrilled to introduce one of our members of the advisory board and our final speaker for the morning, James Moore, who's the COO for Your Parking Space. James has recently finished a 2-year tenure as the General Manager of the UK consumer business at Trainline, including the successful 2019 IPO, and is now focusing on investing in and working with consumer tech startups and scale ups. So he's speaking with us on non-stop growth, so lessons from tech disruptors on rapid scaling. We're going to have a few minutes for questions at the end, so please do be adding those to the chat. I'm going to hand over to James, but thank you so much indeed for joining us today.
Morning, everyone. Hi. So as Emma has said, my name is James Moore, and I'm going to talk to you about lessons that I've learned from working with big tech on scaling up businesses. So I've got 5 lessons here that I'm going to share. Please ask questions. They're kind of thought starters. Hopefully we can have a bit of discussion as well. Okay. So first of all, why scale? Before we get into the how, let's talk about why. Now, I'd like to start with a quote, and I'd like to ask anyone who is a film buff to complete the rest of the quote if they are able to. So I'd like to know what second prize is, and I'd like to know what third prize is. So the quote is from Alec Baldwin. It is Glengarry Glen Ross is the film, and it was out in 1992, and it talks very much to the imperative that businesses have for scaling. So Alec is addressing his audience of washed out salespeople, and he is setting them a challenge, and he tells them that the challenge for them, there is a first prize for the challenge, as they all know, and that is a Cadillac Eldorado. So my question for you is, what is the second prize? And what is the third prize? Please, anyone who is knowledgeable about this, put it in the chat, and I will. I will check it out. Has anyone answered?
There's going to be too much cheating. It's like an online pub quiz.
I can't see any.
Oh, nothing is coming up.
Nothing. Okay. Well, we're short on time, so let me dive into the answer. First prize is a Cadillac Eldorado. The second prize, substantially less. So second prize is a set of steak knives. And the third prize is you're fired. Now, it talks to the imperative that we have in tech. The first prize is huge. It's huge. If you win in a marketplace business, if you win in a software as a service sector, the first prize is enormous. The second prize is pretty tiny, actually. And the third prize is no existence anymore. Tech has disrupted the way in which we think about the way in which sectors work, and businesses have to get to first place fast. So scaling is an imperative. It's not just an imperative for being competitive, it's an imperative for existence. So Glengarry Glen Ross type of markets are the markets which we exist in today. So I have learned these lessons from some practical experience, as Emma talked about. I spent 20 years in tech with some big names, as you can see there. Now I'm an investor in a couple of small scale-up businesses, Wombat and Jigsaw, and I'm a COO and an investor in the biggest parking marketplace in the UK, Your Parking. I'm going to dive into the lessons. So the first lesson that we learn from big tech is that big tech wins by prioritizing speed over everything else, by prioritizing speed over efficiency, by prioritizing speed, sometimes at the expense of quite large risks. And I want to tell the story of a very well-known ride-sharing app, which I'm sure you can all guess the name of, and how they grew in Europe. So this business had a process for opening in cities. Now, often we talk about this business and we talk about it in the context of the gig economy, and we talk about it in the context of its working culture and those things. But what we don't talk about is how it won by scaling fast. So it prioritized speed over everything else in opening its UK cities. So its process for opening a city was day one, the evaluation of the city starts. By day 14, 2 weeks later, the city is live. In that process, there's been a legal evaluation, there's been hiring of drivers, and there's been a marketing effort to drive demand. And in that 2 weeks, the city was opened. Thereafter, through aggressive promotions and through large-scale marketing spending and hiring of drivers, that business then gets to scale very quickly. And what that has done for them is it's overwhelmed their competitors, and it has meant that they've got to scale and they have some leverage in that marketplace. Now note that in a two-week time frame, you have to take risks. And one of the risks that they took was not asking for permission. They took a risk of not necessarily going through all of the licensing frameworks that they could have done. And that has meant that they've got to scale very quickly, and suddenly they've got leverage. It's very hard for authorities then to push back to them if they are providing a brilliant service and they have a large number of customers in any city market. And so this business, which shall remain nameless, scaled very, very fast across all of Europe by prioritizing speed over everything else and by taking risks that others would not. So the lesson really is prioritize speed over everything else, maximize your velocity, take risks that bigger companies don't, get to market with a feature set. And the other thing about getting to market quickly is that you learn quickly and you get real-time feedback on what customers are doing. And they enabled that by getting live quickly and iterating. So getting done, it meant that they weren't perfect when they went live, but they started learning quickly. And then they had to ask for forgiveness rather than asking for permission from the relevant authorities. But in doing so, they then had leverage that they wouldn't have had normally. Number two is about how businesses are organized around customer problems. So Spotify organizes around customer problems, and its little teams are called squads. Those squads then form into bigger tribes, which is multiple squads. At Trainline, we had squads as well. In Amazon, they call these teams 2 pizza teams. And they're called 2 pizza teams because you can feed these teams with 2 pizzas. They are small, agile teams, and they are cross-functional. They consist of some tech talent, they consist of some analytical talent, and they consist of some commercial talent. Now, typically in Amazon, Amazon builds out a sector by having supply management teams, sometimes some warehouse management teams, folks, some analysts, some product people, and then some marketing folks to drive demand. And what it has understood is that, and the same applies to Spotify and the same applies to what we did Trainline, is that these teams, if you make them autonomous and you give them a wide range of skills in these teams, they can execute really fast and they can get you to scale quickly in a way that large, functionally oriented organizations cannot. And because if the IT director has a certain set of priorities and they're very different from the marketing director's set of priorities, and they both have big empires, then those things always clash. And what you lose is the problem that the customer has to be solved. And the customer's problem needs some solving, both from marketing and from IT, and from maybe some analytical horsepower and from some supply-oriented horsepower as well. So Amazon links all of those together. So does Spotify, so did we at Trainline. And that really works, and it allows you to get products to market quickly and to build a very responsive, customer-focused proposition in any given sector. So build out your 2 pizza teams, T-shape and empower your people. So this talks to a wide range of skills and autonomy for that team. And then set your customer-oriented OKRs. So set your targets around what the customer needs, not around profit or revenue or those kind of very generic business imperatives. Number 3 is something that I learned at eBay, and it's really about scaling. One of the critical skill sets for scaling is process excellence. And if you can become a process ninja, and for us it was Lean Six Sigma, and getting our teams to Lean Six Sigma black belt qualifications. Really enabled us to go fast and operate at a much bigger scale. So I have the example of how we scaled our marketing operation across all of Europe. We used to have this central operations team who used to build out all campaigns, and campaigns were then requested by the country markets. Countries used to say, oh, the center's rubbish, they never deliver on time. And the center used to say, well, the countries are rubbish, they never brief us. And we had quite a slow process, and the reason it was and it was slow because of those 2 different forces, and it was slow because it was a paper-driven process where there would be a series of stages that a country would need to do in order to get a campaign live. but we hadn't instrumented it, we hadn't measured it, and we had no data on whether the countries were right or whether the centre was right. So what we did is we started, we implemented actually a Jira-based system where all of the stages of the inputs through the creation of a marketing campaign and then the execution of it were measured and time-stamped. And then I used to be able to start to compare one country versus another and versus the center and look at, for example, input metrics like who actually briefed this on time, and if they briefed it on time, did they execute on time? And by doing all of that process work, instead of having an argument and a very time-consuming debate about who was right and who was wrong, we just let the data do the talking. And so I started to publish a league table on who briefed on time and who didn't, and who got their campaigns done and who didn't. And it was a really, really fundamental lesson in scaling that I learned around how to motivate across a massive organization in multiple countries. So setting up this league table meant that nobody wanted to be bottom, and the data did its talking itself, and I didn't have to do any talking. And counterintuitively, the Germans, who I would have thought were very organised and brilliant, were not good. We had a team who were not planned and organised, and over there, and actually some of the other countries who I expected to be lower down the table were pretty good, and it meant that everybody improved, and it was a critical factor in getting to scale. So getting great at processes is really important. And I suppose the generic lessons are measure your processes, skill up your people on techniques like Lean Six Sigma, instrument and automate everything, and then create these internal market in order to drive efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, Amazon's work backwards principle. So Amazon has this thing about writing a press release for 3 years in the future, so that you have a very clear North Star of where you're going to. And instead of starting from where you are now and saying, well, how can we make this business where we are now and our current operations incrementally better every few months? They say, where do we need to be in 3 years' time? And more than where do we need to be, how will we announce this? How can we write this in a customer-friendly way? And so they write a press release. We write press releases for some of the business that I worked for when I was at Amazon. And you write it so that you can announce it, and it's very, very clear. When you write a press release, it has to be super simple. You have to write it in customer terms. And so you say, well, we are going to set up this business that will deliver X, Y, and Z for customers. These are the benefits for customers, and this is why it's going to be better than the competition. And then you have to ask yourself, well, in order to get there, what needs to be true? What needs to be true to make that happen? And often that can make you, instead of making incremental leaps, incremental steps, it can drive you to giant leaps. And so when you write that disruptive customer proposition, you set your 3-year goal, then you ask yourself, what are the giant leaps that we need to make? And instead of making small steps that take you multiple years, you can get there very quickly. And often the outcome of working backwards from an Amazon perspective is that tasks that may take 3 years through an incremental process suddenly can happen in 6 months because someone has thought big and they've thought around the problem and they've taken a big leap. So work backwards. Last learning that I've had is to read some books on the techniques of scaling. Here's my little book list, and I really encourage you to read these. They're excellent. So number 1, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries is all about getting things to market quickly, iterating fast, and using customer data to drive customer data and testing to drive how you steer your business, rather than doing a sort of waterfall approach and kind of setting out what everything will be, because you will learn so much from customers. Next one is Blitz Scaling by Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn. You should read this. It is brilliant. It talks to how to scale fast. It talks to the prioritization of speed over efficiency. And then the last one is inspired by Marty Kagan, which is simply about how do you keep releasing products and keep learning from the feedback of them and keep iterating quickly. So 3 books for you to read. That is my whistle-stop tour of 5 lessons for rapid scaling. There's my list of 5 points. Very happy to take questions from anyone.
Thank you, James, so much. That was brilliant.